Hey everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day, in which I manipulate a lawyer into letting me recite a lawyer joke in open court and into the trial transcript. This is long, but I hope it's worth the trip. In the late 1990s, I was a teacher and a girl in one of my classes began stalking me. We had her charged and eventually the case came to trial. The story is long and complicated and maybe I'll write it out someday. At any rate, I live in a small town, so her lawyer and I knew one another. He was a dick, and I guess he thought I was one too because we didn't get along very well. Our kids attended the same daycare and our wives worked together, so it was often very tense in social situations. I spent a day on the stand being questioned by the prosecutor, then faced cross-examination. As I said, the story is complicated, but a big part of the case had to do with certain assignments the girl had done while in my classes and her interpretation of the corrections and comments I made on them. For example, this girl had very advanced vocabulary for her age, but when she didn't really know what she was talking about, she'd throw a bunch of big words at me thinking it sounded impressive. My comment was something to the effect of, "I don't see enough of you," which her lawyer tried to claim was evidence that I was encouraging her. So he was questioning me on each and every assignment I had ever given out in the classes this girl had taken from me. She kept all the marked assignments and zeroed in on one in particular. It was a satire assignment modeled on Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal, and the students were to make their own outrageous suggestion for a social problem. This girl had misunderstood what satire meant and just went for something gruesome and violent. Something like cutting off the feet of skateboarders to teach them a lesson. In court, the lawyer suggested that I was encouraging her to reveal her dark, violent fantasies. I said it was a satire assignment and she clearly didn't understand it. The rest of the exchange went something like this. L is lawyer, M is me. "I put it to you that you were the one who suggested she writes this." Holds up essay. No, as I said, the assignment was supposed to be a satirical suggestion. That's not what she did. "Come now, when you gave the assignment out, you knew you would get some strange essays back, didn't you?" No, we spent 2 classes reading and critiquing the original Modest Proposal, and we spent another class discussing satire. "So you're saying when you handed out the assignment, you didn't think they'd misunderstand?" "I thought they might." "So you didn't say anything to head that off?" "Yes, I gave examples." "What do you mean, examples?" "When we talked about satire, I gave examples of different kinds of satirical writing." "Like what?" "Stories, plays, poems, and even jokes." "Did you read all these things with them?" "No, the stories and plays I summarized and I shared a couple of jokes." "Do you remember any of them?" "Maybe one." "What was the joke?" Me long pause as if recollecting. "Do you know why researchers are using lawyers instead of rats for experiments? Because there are more lawyers than rats. The researchers don't get attached to them like they do the rats, and there are just some things you can't get a rat to do." The judge, prosecutor, court reporter, and several police officers watching all laughed out loud. The judge had to call a brief recess to restore order. We still see each other every now and then. I always smile and wave. Lawyers can really inspire a lot of very sharp comedy. What about you guys? Do you know any lawyer jokes? If you do, share them in the chat because I'd love to read them. I did exactly what my floor manager wanted me to. So, a little bit of backstory. A while back, I was in a wheelchair. My legs were so painful I wasn't able to stand on them, and I had pain attacks at night which would last for hours on end. Doctors couldn't figure out what the heck was wrong with me until I got even sicker. I started not being able to hold in food, only liquids. When I went to a specialist and did a blood test, it turned out I had a gluten intolerance, celiac disease. When I stopped eating gluten, I was able to walk within a few months. Turned out I have another disease affiliated with celiac disease called gluten neuropathy. It means that when I ingest gluten, my nerves are affected. To this day, when I eat gluten, the pain returns and I have a really hard time walking. Now, I work at a company as a help desk employee. I help people having technical issues with their internet, so to say. Due to the ongoing virus, we work at home every other week. Last week was a week I was supposed to work at the office. So I have told everyone who needed to know about my affliction. I also told them about my trouble walking when I ingested something I shouldn't have. So last week, I ate something containing gluten. I cannot for the life of me figure out what it was, but it was as clear as day. The night before I had to go to work, I went to bed with a lot of pain, and I knew it would get worse the following day. I told my partner I would ask to stay at home if I had a lot of trouble walking. The next day came around and it happened like I thought it would. I was in so much pain, I needed my walking stick to get around. So around 8 a.m., I called my floor manager and told him and asked if I could work at home. He told me a lot of people wanted to work at home for the most stupid reasons and told me I should come to the office. So I did. Instead of calling in sick, I mustered up all my strength, took some heavy pain meds with me, and started my journey to the office. Now, normally it takes me about half an hour, but because I had a harder time walking than my gran, it took me more than an hour to get there. I arrived at the office 15 minutes late and ran into the floor manager when I was taking my things out of my locker. At this point, I should tell you how I looked at that time. White as a sheet, hair in a messy bun, shaking from pain and leaning heavily on my walking stick. The pain was so bad. I was wincing and almost couldn't stand. My floor manager was floored. He took one look at me and his mouth fell open wide. He muttered something about not knowing it would be this bad and talking about my other colleagues and how they asked to work at home for small things, how we had to treat everyone equally, etc. I worked a full day, colleagues watching over me, getting me everything I need and taking awesome care of me. I heard one of them say how ashamed my floor manager was about making me come to work and how his response was everything I hoped for. Needless to say, he told me whenever this would happen again, I would have no trouble calling in to work at home. I could have called in sick, but my belief is that they had to learn the hard way, or this would have happened again in the future. I know it's probably not as epic as some stories on here, but I just wanted to share, make you enjoy the same pain-filled joy I had when I saw his face when he looked at me. It was the best thing ever. Thankfully, this is a manager that, upon seeing you in this condition, did feel that shame, because I've read enough of these stories to know that there's plenty of managers that don't feel shame over basically anything involving their employees. Keep that travel policy strict. Several years ago, I worked for a government contractor and traveled extensively. Usually it was for meetings in godforsaken places, but sometimes it was somewhere cool or to spend time on a ship, sometimes both. For one such ship ride, I was to board an aircraft carrier in Japan, sail to Guam, and get a flight from the ship to the island before flying home. If you've never been a non-essential passenger on an aircraft carrier, you don't get a departure time when you're planning your trip. You get a departure window of several days and you only get to know for sure the day before your flight. So I knew a range of dates that I might arrive on Guam. The plan was to book a hotel for all 4 nights, and until we knew we were flying the next day, to just push the reservation back before the deadline. Once we had the date, we would move our flights home to the next day to only spend 1 night in a hotel. My boss made his reservation at Days Inn while we discussed this plan in his office. He said it was the only hotel on our travel site that was within the per diem limit, so I should book soon. By the time I was at my desk, the last room was gone, and the only hotel available through our corporate travel site was a junior presidential suite at a pricey beach resort that ran somewhere around $1,400 per night. I looked around budget travel sites and direct booking with a few hotels, but there were a major fleet exercise happening around the island and hotels were packed. There were even rumors that they would set up tents on unused airstrips to house all the Marines coming in. I told our travel department all of this and proposed that if I book an Airbnb, with the caveat that I would have to pay for all 4 nights even if I only stayed for 1, but that it would still be $1,000 cheaper than 1 night at the only hotel available. My proposal was raised to the head of the travel department, who wrote back rather aggressively that if I booked an Airbnb, I would only be reimbursed for the night I actually stayed there, and that I would not be reimbursed at all if I booked the expensive hotel. My instructions were to call our travel office when I landed and they would find whatever was available, that a room within the per diem rate would surely become available. Fast forward to landing in Guam. First call I made was to change to the next possible flight home, but I had missed the last one of the day, so I called the travel office. Of course, with my luck, the person who answered was new. And by new, I mean she had started while I was on the ship. She looks it up and says there are no rooms available. I told her I was pretty sure there was one room available, and she replied, "Well, yes, but it's way over the per diem rate." I explained everything and told her to ask the head of her department that he knew the situation. After a long hold, she came back and said that I had a couple options. I could search around by myself for an Airbnb that was within per diem, see if my boss would let me stay in his room on a cot, or she could book the suite and I would be reimbursed in full. So, on my expense report, I made a special note that I had no transportation expense to get to the airport in Guam because my hotel room came with a private car. The only fallout was that they got very picky about my expense reports for a while. I was a pretty by-the-book business traveler, so it usually wasn't an issue, but one time a hotel I booked was 1 cent per night over the per diem limit, so they rejected my entire expense report. I filled out a new one. It was a terrible online system, so I couldn't just edit the old one, explaining that I would pay the excess out of pocket, in line with policy. I also forwarded the rejection email to my boss, CCing the head of travel and asking which budget code I should charge for the half hour it took to rectify this 4-cent mistake. You don't need to know my hourly rate to know that it cost the company substantially more than 4 cents. He gave me his managerial budget, and funny enough, they stopped questioning my expenses after that. That's incredibly frustrating that because they screwed up or are not willing to work with you at all, that they start giving you a hard time after all this. 4 cents? That's just silly. Well, you did want your fries extra crispy. I work at a popular fast food place that shares the name of a certain famous blue hedgehog. One night, me and a coworker were closing up when the timer on the deep fryer went off. My coworker turned off the timer but didn't take the fries that were in the fryer out of the oil. I asked him why, and he proceeded to tell me about the lady who ordered them. Apparently, she came frequently and only ordered fries, and every single time, she would be rude and send them back, claiming they were not crispy enough. So my coworker and I decided that they would most definitely be crispy. I looked at the clock. We closed in 10 minutes. Perfect. 9 minutes to close, the fries are in the fryer. 5 minutes to close, those bad boys are still cooking. 3 minutes to close, the fries have turned a reddish brown. 1 minute to close, my coworker takes the fries out of the oil and I package them up. I break one open and there isn't even any potato left inside. They were like rocks. We send the fries out to the lady, shut off the equipment, locked the doors, and turned out the lights. My coworker and I are hysterically laughing, picturing her driving home in her car, crunching on some rock-hard fries. Even my manager was laughing. The best part is that if she came back to complain, no one would be there, because we had already closed up and went home. Hopefully she liked her extra crispy fries. Fast food employees aren't exactly paid enough to deal with these Karens who are constantly complaining about stuff, so I think if you consistently put yourself in a situation where you can be made an enemy at a fast food place, don't be surprised to have some stuff pop up against you. Don't check my emails. Bless me, Reddit, for I have sinned. First time poster. Backstory: I work for the small company and I'm friends with the owner. He's been overseas for almost a year and I'm pretty much dealing with all the office work. I just message him whenever something important comes into the company emails. When the virus hit, we were all furloughed due to him being still stuck overseas. But I still checked the company's emails from time to time and did a little office work pro bono because he's our friend and landlord. Also, it's nothing difficult. So an important email comes in, a court case the company is being asked to witness about, and of course I message him. As usual, days go by without him even reading it, so I give him a bigger and remind him that I can only help him if he reads his freaking correspondence. He messages back saying leave the emails alone, I can't afford to pay you until I get back. Might just be me, but I didn't like his tone. Did I mention I've been doing it for free? Cue malicious compliance. An email popped in that very same day, today, asking to confirm that we want to cancel our employee health insurance plans. This is something my boss has been on my butt about for months. Again, mainly because it takes days for him to reply to a simple query. Don't want me checking company emails? Fine. Enjoy paying an additional 2 to 3 months health insurance. I'm not sure if there's any kind of messy area with the law when it comes to people working even though they're furloughed. So maybe the boss is saying that so abruptly or jarringly because they just can't legally say, yes, keep working. If they do, it opens them up to a bunch of liability. That being said, they shouldn't have ignored the concerns expressed. And with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today. So what I want to know at this point is, which of these stories was the most interesting to you today and why? Let me know in the comments below. And thank you all so much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Thank you all again for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.